There are moments in life when words feel heavy, when silence presses against your lips, not because you have nothing to say, but because you finally understood that not everything deserves an answer. You've been there before. Someone provokes you, someone misunderstands your intentions, someone crosses a line, expecting you to react. And for a moment, your mind burns with all the things you could say, every argument, every proof, every word that could show you're right. But deep down, something whispers, "Don't." That whisper isn't weakness, it's wisdom. The world often mistakes silence for surrender. But a Stoic knows silence is not the absence of power. It is the proof of it. You've learned that sometimes the loudest voice in the room is the one saying nothing at all. Because silence, when chosen consciously, is not retreat, it's mastery. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion. There is never a need to get worked up or to trouble your soul about things you can't control." In those words lives the heart of calm, the understanding that silence is not inaction. It's disciplined restraint. It's the act of choosing your peace over your pride. Think of all the times you've wasted energy defending yourself to people who never cared to understand you. The times you've argued to prove a point that didn't need proving. The times you reacted out of impulse, only to regret the noise that followed. You begin to see that not every battle deserves your voice. Not every conflict deserves your emotion. And not every opinion deserves a response. In the quiet moments when your mind settles, you realize how much power you've given away in reactions, in explanations, in unnecessary words. And that's when silence begins to look less like weakness and more like armor. Silence is the shield that protects your focus. It is the pause that preserves your dignity. It is the unseen discipline of those who have mastered themselves. The Stoics taught that every external disturbance is an invitation not to speak, but to observe, not to control the other, but to command the self. Because the moment you choose silence, you remove the world's ability to control your inner state. You see, words tie you to conflict, but silence frees you from it. Most people don't understand this. They rush to fill every gap, to win every argument, to have the last word, unaware that the need to respond is the very chain that binds them. You, however, are learning a different kind of strength, the strength that comes from stillness, the kind that doesn't react to noise, but absorbs it and lets it fade. The kind that understands you don't need to win every battle. You only need to remain unmoved by them. And that's the paradox. When you stop fighting every fight, you start winning the ones that truly matter. So, when should you be silent? When emotion burns hot, and you know your words would come from pride, not wisdom. When others speak to provoke, not to understand. When noise surrounds you, but peace calls you back inward. When defending yourself means losing your calm. When explaining yourself means wasting your energy. When responding would only feed chaos. In these moments, silence is not emptiness, it's elegance. It is the calm refusal to be disturbed. And in that quiet strength, you begin to notice something profound. Silence wins not because it overpowers others, but because it overpowers you. It tames the part of you that always wants to prove, to explain, to be heard. It teaches patience when ego demands recognition. It turns every reaction into reflection. That is where this journey begins, with awareness that silence isn't passive. It's powerful. It's not about ignoring the world, but mastering how you move within it, in a society that rewards noise. Your silence becomes rebellion. In a world that feeds on reaction, your stillness becomes strength. You start to see that peace is not something found in isolation. It's something created in the middle of chaos. And each time you choose silence over reaction, you're not backing down, you're rising above. You're choosing wisdom over ego, presence over pride, calm over conflict, because silence doesn't just win battles, it prevents wars within yourself. There is a strength that does not shout. It does not demand to be seen or heard. It does not seek validation or recognition. It exists quietly, like a mountain that does not speak yet defines the horizon. That strength is silence, the unspoken wisdom that the Stoics mastered. The ancient philosophers understood something most people still overlook today. Power does not come from speaking. It comes from knowing when not to. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome and student of his own mind, wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." That sentence carries the entire weight of Stoic silence, because silence is not about muting your voice, it's about mastering your reaction. When you're silent, you are not surrendering your position. You are simply refusing to let emotions drag you into a storm that serves no purpose. You're saying, "I will not be moved by what does not matter." A Seneca, the Roman Stoic, spoke of this often. He said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." How true that remains. Because most of the pain that drives us to react, the anger, the frustration, the need to respond, it lives in imagination, not fact. Someone insults you, and you imagine an attack on your worth. Someone ignores you, and you imagine rejection. Someone disagrees, and you imagine disrespect. But silence dismantles imagination. It pauses the rush of stories your mind tries to tell. It gives you the distance to see that not every thought deserves belief. In that distance, peace begins. That's why the Stoics saw silence as the highest form of discipline. It's the pause between impulse and action, the breath between thought and word, the stillness between emotion and response, and in that space, that sacred gap, lies the strength that transforms you. You see, silence is not only about the mouth, it's about the mind. A person who has silenced their mind has no need to prove themselves with noise. Think of the warriors who train not to fight, but to remain calm even when surrounded. The philosopher who listens more than he speaks. The leader who speaks only when his words carry weight. That is Stoicism in practice. Power that moves without rush. Wisdom that listens before it answers. In silence, you become an observer of life, not a prisoner of it. You begin to see people not as enemies to be defeated, but as reflections of human struggle. You begin to see conflict not as chaos to escape, but as training for patience. And you begin to see yourself, stripped of noise, as someone who needs less and understands more. Silence refines perception. It helps you notice what others miss: tone, timing, truth. While the loud ones are busy reacting, you are quietly gathering understanding. You learn when to speak and when to let silence speak for you, because silence has its own voice. It speaks through your posture, your presence, your restraint. It says, "I am in control of myself," and that message carries further than words ever could. When you choose silence, you choose to protect your energy from being wasted on noise. You reclaim control over your internal state, the only thing a Stoic truly values mastery over. This is the essence of apatheia, the Stoic ideal of inner calm. Not indifference, but freedom from unnecessary disturbance. Not silence born from fear, but silence born from strength. To be silent when insulted, to be calm when provoked, to be unmoved when misunderstood. That is not weakness, it is victory. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And silence is the most disciplined reaction of all. It's a choice to remain untangled in the web of emotions that others throw at you. When you remain silent, you tell the universe, "My peace is not for sale." The Stoic truth is this: every battle begins within, and silence is the weapon that disarms the enemy before the fight even starts. Because how can someone defeat you when you refuse to play their game? How can they win an argument you never entered? How can they disturb your peace when you've stopped giving them access to it? This is why silence wins, not in the world outside, but in the world within. So, when life pulls you into noise, remember the truth. You cannot control the storm, but you can control whether you add to it. And in that choice, the choice of silence, you find not just calm, but command. You know the truth now, that silence is power. But knowing and living it are two very different things, because silence is not easy. It goes against the very impulse of human nature. Your ego does not like silence. Your pride does not like restraint. Your emotions do not like waiting. When someone disrespects you, every cell in your body burns to defend itself. When someone spreads lies, you want to shout the truth. When you're misunderstood, your instinct is to correct, to explain, to prove. But that's the trap, the ego's voice disguised as justice. It tells you that you must respond to protect your reputation, when in truth, your reaction only feeds the chaos. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." You see, the louder they get, the more you want to match their volume. And when you do, you lose the battle before it begins, because now you're playing on their level, emotional, reactive, uncentered. The Stoics warned us, every time you react without thought, you give someone else power over you, and the more you speak from impulse, the more you drift away from peace. Think about how often silence has scared you. The moment you stop talking, the mind rushes to fill the void. You start replaying what was said, crafting imaginary arguments, fighting invisible battles in your head. It's not the silence outside that torments you, it's the noise within. That noise is built from fear, fear of judgment, fear of losing control, fear of seeming weak. But the Stoics understood that the only true weakness is letting fear decide your behavior. So you speak, not to express truth, but to silence discomfort. You react, not because it's wise, but because stillness feels unbearable, and in doing so, you betray your own calm. The truth is, a silence requires self-trust. To be silent when the world demands reaction, you must believe that your worth is not dependent on others' understanding. That is a rare kind of strength. Seneca once said, "He who is brave is free." And there is nothing braver than staying calm when everything in you screams to react. But here lies the inner conflict. Your ego wants noise because noise creates illusion. Illusion of control, illusion of dominance, illusion of being right. Yet, deep down, your soul craves peace, not victory. Every human lives between these two forces, the need to protect the self-image and the desire to protect the soul. When you argue with a fool, your silence feels like defeat. But when you master yourself, you realize silence was the victory all along. Because silence breaks the cycle of reaction, It ends the endless loop of emotional exchange. It turns the mirror back on the other person, forcing them to face their own noise. You will notice, when you no longer react, people become uncomfortable. They expect conflict. They thrive on it. And when you deny them that energy, they feel powerless. That's because your calm exposes their chaos. Your restraint reveals their lack of it. Your silence becomes a mirror reflecting their unrest. But to reach that level of peace, you must walk through fire, the fire of your own impulses, the heat of wanting to be heard, the burning need to prove your side. The Stoics faced this too. They lived in a world full of politics, gossip, betrayal, just like ours. Yet they learned that not every noise deserves an answer. Not every battle deserves your sword. Sometimes walking away is not weakness, it's wisdom, because peace cannot exist where noise rules your actions. But even knowing this truth, you will struggle. You will have moments when you break silence. You'll speak from anger, from pride, from hurt, and afterward, you'll feel the weight of it. That is part of the journey. No one masters silence in a day. Even Marcus Aurelius, emperor of the known world, had to remind himself daily to be calm, to stay unmoved. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Every time you choose silence, you train that power. Every time you resist reaction, you build peace like a muscle. But make no mistake, silence will test you. It will make you feel misunderstood, unseen, unheard. It will demand that you surrender the comfort of noise for the discipline of stillness. And yet, that is where transformation begins. The ego breaks in the quiet. The false self fades. And what remains is something purer, a version of you untouched by opinions, unaffected by insult, unmoved by chaos. So when silence feels heavy, remember that weight is not punishment, it's purification. It's your soul learning to live without noise. It's your mind learning to stop fighting shadows. That's why the path of silence is not for the weak. It's for those who want to master themselves, not the world. Because the greatest battles are fought in whispers, and the loudest victories make no sound. There comes a moment in every person's life when silence stops feeling like defeat and begins to feel like freedom. It doesn't happen in a single day. It begins quietly, almost unnoticeably. A moment where you pause instead of reacting. A moment where you breathe instead of breaking. A moment where you realize peace is not something others can give you. It's something you protect. At first, that silence feels uncomfortable. The mind demands noise. The ego demands movement. But when you refuse to give in, something powerful happens. You begin to see things as they are, not as your emotions paint them. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." You finally understand what he meant. The world will always create storms, but you decide whether to walk into them. And so, the turning point comes when you stop trying to control what's outside and begin mastering what's within. This is where silence becomes your teacher. When someone insults you now, you feel the sting, but you don't answer. You watch the feeling rise like a wave, and instead of reacting, you let it pass. You realize it's not their words that hurt you, it's your attachment to them. That realization is the doorway to peace. Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Silence is that proof. It's not the absence of strength, it's its purest expression. Because only a strong person can stay silent in chaos. Only a disciplined mind can remain still when the world provokes it. The weak seek to shout their way into control. The wise stay silent because they already have it, and when that awareness dawns, you begin to feel different. You walk through the same world, but you no longer respond to every vibration of noise around you. You see people arguing, and you feel no pull to join. You hear criticism, and it no longer pierces you. You witness chaos, and yet your soul remains still. This is apatheia, the Stoic calm, freedom not from emotion, but from enslavement to it. You start noticing how silence protects your energy. It saves you from meaningless explanations, from draining debates, from the endless need to justify yourself. You no longer crave to be understood because you understand yourself. The realization settles deep. You cannot control the opinion of others, but you can control whether it disturbs your mind. And that control, quiet, invisible, unspoken, is what the Stoics called mastery of the self. It's the same mastery that made Marcus Aurelius a philosopher, emperor, and Epictetus a slave who rose to spiritual freedom. Each of them discovered the same truth, that real power is not in commanding others, but in commanding your own reactions. In this turning point, silence transforms from effort to nature. It's no longer something you try to do. It becomes who you are. When someone provokes you, your first instinct is peace. When noise surrounds you, your first response is stillness. When conflict arises, your first thought is understanding. You don't suppress emotion, you witness it. You don't avoid truth, you wait for it. This is the shift the Stoics sought, to move from reaction to reflection, from chaos to calm, from ego to essence. And once you taste this kind of peace, you realize how rare it is, and how much noise the world lives in without even knowing. You start noticing how easily people give away their calm. A single insult, a single disagreement, a single delay, and they're lost. They react, argue, defend, fight, as if peace were something small enough to lose in a sentence. But you begin to see differently now. You see that silence is not emptiness, it's presence, it's awareness, it's power under perfect control. It's the difference between the fire that burns everything around it and the flame that warms without destruction. Silence is that flame contained, deliberate, alive, and in mastering it, you begin to master yourself. Epictetus said it best, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Freedom, then, isn't found in speaking louder, it's found in no longer needing to. So now, when someone tests your calm, you no longer see it as an attack. You see it as training, an invitation to rise above, a chance to prove that silence, once your struggle, has become your strength. You start to understand what the Stoics meant when they said, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed." Because harm begins in perception, and silence redefines perception. It turns pain into patience, conflict into clarity, and reaction into reflection. This is the turning point, when silence stops being something you practice and becomes the very state you live from. It is one thing to understand the beauty of silence, and another to live it every day in a world that thrives on noise. Because silence, like all virtues, is not an idea to admire, it's a discipline to practice. And discipline, as the Stoics knew, is the foundation of peace. Marcus Aurelius began every morning by reminding himself, "Today you will meet with interference, ingratitude, arrogance, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness, all of them due to ignorance of what is good and evil." He didn't write those words as a complaint. He wrote them as preparation. He expected noise, so it never broke his calm. He anticipated insult, so it never touched his peace. That's the first practice. Expect disturbance and stay still. The modern world rewards the loud, the fast, the reactive, but a Stoic moves differently. You walk through life like a calm observer, noticing the noise, but not absorbing it. When people argue, you listen. When they provoke, you breathe. When they misunderstand you, you let it go. You stop explaining yourself to those who have already decided not to understand. You stop wasting energy defending what peace already protects. Because silence isn't passive, it's selective. You are not refusing to speak. You are choosing when it matters. The second practice: respond with intention, not impulse. Before you speak, pause. Before you react, reflect. Before you judge, observe. Ask yourself, does this need my voice or my silence? Will my words create clarity or chaos? If it's chaos, stay silent. If it's clarity, speak slowly, gently, and with purpose. That pause, that small space before action, is where mastery lives. Seneca once wrote, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." The same is true for speech. To speak on everything is to say nothing that matters. So speak less, but mean more. Let your silence become your filter, and your words become rare and valuable. The third practice: guard your energy as a sacred resource. Every time you argue, explain, or react, you spend energy. Most people spend their days giving energy to what drains them. The Stoic spends his day investing energy in what strengthens him. When someone gossips, you stay silent, not because you agree, but because you refuse to add to the noise. When life throws inconvenience, you stay still, because frustration changes nothing. When others seek validation, you seek understanding. That is how silence becomes power, not by suppression, but by conservation. You protect your peace the way a warrior protects his armor, not because it makes you better than others, but because without it, you are vulnerable to everything. The fourth practice: create moments of intentional silence. In a noisy world, stillness must be built, not found. Take time each day to sit in silence. No phone, no music, no distraction, just your breath, your thoughts, your awareness. At first, you'll hear the noise inside you, the worries, the regrets, the endless stream of thought. But if you stay, if you listen without reacting, you'll notice something. The noise starts to fade, and beneath it, a quiet presence emerges. That's your true self, the calm beneath the storm. Epictetus said, "If you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Because silence often looks like weakness to the noisy, but to the wise, it is the mark of mastery. The fifth practice: replace reaction with reflection. When you feel anger, pause and ask, is this worth my peace? When you feel insulted, ask, am I truly harmed or just my ego? When you feel restless, ask, what am I running from inside myself? These questions turn emotion into education. They transform your triggers into teachers. Soon, silence becomes not just something you do, but something you become. Your life starts to slow down in the best way. You stop rushing to respond, stop forcing outcomes, stop chasing validation. You move through the world quietly, focused, grounded, unshaken, and people will notice. They'll wonder how you stay so calm in chaos. They'll misinterpret your silence as mystery, maybe even arrogance, but you'll know the truth. It's not pride, it's peace. The sixth practice: live your philosophy quietly. The Stoics never needed to announce their discipline. They lived it in restraint, in service, in composure. You do the same. You don't preach calm, you embody it. You don't demand respect. You earn it through stillness. You don't react to noise. You rise above it. Because calm has its own gravity, it draws strength to it without ever chasing, and over time, silence becomes your home. Not a prison, but a sanctuary, a place you retreat to not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You start to realize you don't need to win arguments to prove you're right. You don't need to speak loudly to be understood. You don't need to defend your peace. You just need to protect it. This is the Stoic way, not to conquer the world, but to master yourself within it. Because once you've mastered silence, nothing outside can disturb your inner kingdom. In time, you come to see that silence is not an act, it's a way of being. It's not about withholding words, but about understanding their weight. It's not about ignoring the world, but about no longer being consumed by it. You begin to live differently, more deliberately, more aware of how much power hides in stillness. You wake up and the world still moves with the same noise, the same arguments, the same distractions, the same endless search for validation, but you now are different. You see it all and remain still. You no longer need to be right. You no longer need to be understood. You no longer need to win, because peace, you realize, was never a prize to be won. It was a state you could choose all along. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the rock against which the waves break. It stands firm, and the raging of the sea falls still around it. That is what you've become, the rock, unmoved by the storm. The waves may crash, people may misunderstand, life may test you again and again, but your silence absorbs it all without breaking. And in that calm you discover something deeper than peace. You discover understanding. You begin to see why people act as they do. The angry are suffering, the loud are afraid, the controlling are lost, and so your silence becomes compassion, not pride. You do not rise above people, you simply stop fighting them in your mind. You understand that silence is not withdrawal, it's mastery. It's the refusal to waste your spirit on things that do not serve it. When you stop reacting, you stop feeding chaos. When you stop speaking to be heard, you start listening to understand. When you stop needing to be seen, you finally see clearly. And that clarity, that rare, quiet wisdom, becomes your strength. Seneca said, "No man was ever wise by chance." Silence, then, is not an accident of personality. It's a cultivated art. A choice repeated in moments of emotion, a discipline refined through discomfort, a virtue shaped through restraint. It takes time, patience, and failure, but in the end, it transforms you. You stop chasing peace, you become it. And that's when you realize the true paradox of silence, that it doesn't isolate you from life. It connects you to it more deeply than words ever could. Because only in silence can you truly hear the quiet pulse of your own heart, the rhythm of your breath, the soft, unseen current of existence itself. Only in silence can you see clearly how small the noise was, how brief the anger, how unnecessary the reaction. Everything that once felt urgent now feels light, almost invisible. The things that used to shake you now pass through you like wind through leaves. You no longer hold on to what you cannot control. You no longer resist what simply is. You flow, calm, steady, unmoved. And that is what it means to live like a Stoic, not emotionless but emotionally free, not distant but deeply aware, not silent out of fear, but silent out of wisdom. You learn that silence is not empty, it's full of truth. It's where wisdom grows, it's where strength is reborn. In your silence you find patience, in patience you find clarity, and in clarity you find peace. This is the circle of Stoic calm, the eternal return to stillness. So when life tempts you to react, when noise demands your attention, when the world pulls you into its chaos, remember this: you are not what happens around you. You are what remains still within you. Marcus Aurelius lived by that truth. So did Seneca. So did Epictetus. And now, so can you, because silence, practiced long enough, becomes strength, and strength, held quietly, becomes peace. And when peace becomes who you are, nothing can take it from you. Peace is not the absence of noise. It's the mastery of yourself in the midst of it.